Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always ready.
Awesome. So today we're going to tackle a couple of stories from the Gospel of John.
Oh yeah, John. He's got some interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, like he always takes things a little deeper. Right.
Definitely. A
Right.
little more symbolic, a little more reading between the lines.
Right. Exactly. So we're focusing on the wedding at Cana, and then we're going to jump over to Jesus in the Jerusalem temple. Two pretty big stories, huh?
Yeah, and they might seem kind of separate at first glance, but, John's gospel, he's very intentional about the order of things. So I think we'll find some really cool connections as we dig in.
I think so too.
Uh,
Okay, so Cana first. I mean, come on, a wedding. Who doesn't love a good wedding story?
Always a good time.
Right. And this one's got Jesus, his mom, the disciples, the whole crew's there. It's a party. But then, disaster strikes. They run out of wine.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, not at all. Especially back then, right? Like, hospitality was a huge deal. Running out of wine, that's
Yeah.
a major social faux pas.
Huge embarrassment for the family. I mean, can you imagine?
Totally. So Jesus's mom, she's like, hey, Jesus, we've got a problem here. He's like, woman, what has that got to do with me? My time hasn't come yet.
Interesting.
What's that about this time thing?
Well, that's one of those things John does, right? He uses this word hour throughout his gospel. And it always refers to something really specific, like the moment when Jesus is going to be glorified.
Oh, I see, like pointing toward his death and resurrection.
Exactly. So even in this very everyday situation,
Mhm.
Jesus is operating on a much bigger level. He knows what's coming.
Wow, that's heavy.
Mm.
But his mom, she's not phased at all, right?
No.
She's got that mom faith. She just tells the servants, do whatever he tells you.
That's all it takes. Just a little nudge and boom, miracle time.
So what does Jesus do? He's got these giant stone jars, right?
Yeah, huge things, like the kind they used for ritual washing. Each one holding, get this, 20 to 30 gallons.
What? That's crazy. So much wine.
It's not just about solving the problem, is it? It's about abundance. It's like God saying, hey, I'm not just going to meet your needs, I'm going to exceed them.
That's awesome. And then there's the head waiter. He comes up to the bridegroom, totally clueless about what just went down.
I know, right? He's like, wow, you saved the best wine for last. Can you imagine?
Hilarious.
Yeah.
But it also makes you think, right? Sometimes God's working miracles in our lives, and we don't even realize it. We've got to pay attention to those little details.
Absolutely. There's grace happening all around us. We just got to open our eyes to see it.
So this miracle at Cana, it's like a grand opening. It's the first one John records in his gospel, right?
Yeah.
It's like, boom, here's Jesus, watch out, world.
Yeah. And the disciples, they see this happen and their faith just explodes.
Makes sense.
It's like, okay, this guy's the real deal.
All right, so after Cana, Jesus and his crew, they head down to Jerusalem. And things are going to get a little more intense, I think.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. So it's Passover. Huge deal, right? Like the biggest religious festival of the year. The city's packed, pilgrims everywhere, all coming to worship at the temple.
The energy must have been incredible.
It was supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
A time of celebration, reflection, coming together to honor God.
But then things take a turn. It's not exactly the peaceful, spiritual scene you'd expect.
Not at all. It's more like a chaotic marketplace. And this
Yeah.
is what really sets Jesus off.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's going on?
Well, think about it. The temple, it's supposed to be this sacred space, right? A
Mhm.
place set apart for prayer and connecting with God.
Yeah.
But it's been turned into this noisy, crowded marketplace. People are selling animals for sacrifices. There are money changers ripping people off at their exchange rates. It's a mess.
Wow, that's pretty disrespectful.
Exactly. And remember, Passover is all about celebrating God's deliverance of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt.
Hmm.
They're supposed to bring their sacrifices as an act of worship, of gratitude. But this commercialization, it's just turned it into a profit-driven spectacle. It's completely missing the point.
So Jesus, I guess he sees all this going on,
And
and
he snaps. He just loses it.
what does he do?
He makes a whip, starts driving everyone out, flipping over tables, scattering coins everywhere. It's intense.
Wow. That's like some serious righteous anger.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just some random outburst. He's fiercely protecting the sanctity of his father's house.
Right.
And his actions, they actually echo a prophecy from the Old Testament, Psalm 69.9. It says, "Zeal for your house will consume me." It's like this moment's been foreshadowed centuries earlier.
That's incredible. So the religious leaders, I bet they were none too pleased with this whole scene.
Oh, yeah. They're not happy. They come up to Jesus and demand a sign, proof that he has the authority to do this. But his response, it totally throws him for a loop.
What does he say?
He says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up."
Ah, okay. What does that even mean?
Well, they took it literally, right? Thought he was talking about tearing down the actual temple building.
Ah, okay. But he wasn't, was he?
Nope. He's speaking on a whole other level. He's talking about his own body. The temple is a metaphor for his physical presence, God dwelling among humanity.
Oh, wow. So he's foreshadowing his death and resurrection?
Exactly. It's only after the resurrection that his disciples finally understand the meaning of his words.
I see. But it's interesting, right? At the wedding, he said his hour hadn't come yet. But here, cleansing the temple, is this his hour? Is this the beginning of his glorification? What do you think?
It's definitely something to think about, right? John's always making us think.
For sure. He really does layer these stories in a way that makes you think and ponder.
You know, it's like a puzzle, and each piece reveals a little more about who Jesus is, and the reactions to him in Jerusalem, they're fascinating. Some people see these miracles, these signs, and they believe. Others, they're still skeptical. But John tells us something really important. Jesus didn't entrust himself to everyone because he knew what was in their hearts.
That's powerful.
It's like, we can't fool God, right? He sees right through us.
He knows us better than we know ourselves, probably.
Definitely. So we've got these two stories, right? The wedding at Cana and the cleansing of the temple.
And at first, they seem pretty different.
But when we look at them together, they reveal so much about who Jesus is. At Cana, we see his power over nature, his compassion for people's needs. In Jerusalem, we see his zeal for true worship, his willingness to stand up for what's right.
Even if it means causing a scene.
Yeah, even if it ruffles some feathers. And both stories, I think they challenge us to think about our own relationship with God.
That's a great point, and that actually leads us perfectly into our final thought for today. Remember, Jesus called his own body the temple. So what does that mean for us? What does it mean to think of our own bodies as temples, places where God's presence dwells?
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah. How does that change the way we live our lives, the choices we make? It's something worth thinking about, wouldn't you say?
It definitely is. It's a question that deserves our careful reflection.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
See you next time.
Bye.